Okay, we're here taking a little respite from a ride, and we're here talking to you about my Royal Enfield Classic 500. Now, I've never gotten this many people paying attention to me because of what I'm riding as I do on this bike. Basically, a lot of people, first question they ask me is, what year is it? And that leads me to suspect that most people believe that it's a much older bike, possibly hand-built or hand-restored. And that is a fun, addicting aspect of owning this bike. Even with my Drifter 1500, which looked like an Indian Chief, I didn't get that much attention. But with this bike, I do. When I joined the motorcycle club called the Roadrunners, the question I kept on getting with everybody who was already in the club was, can a 500 keep up with us? And I definitely don't disrespect that question, because if it wasn't for the fact that I own the bike, I'd be asking the same question if I was in a bike club riding one of my other bikes that I've owned over the years, which have all been much bigger CC bikes. And so I'm not mad that they asked that question, but I definitely would be suspect of a bike that was 350 cc's to keep up with a normal motorcycle group, as much freeway driving as they do. But I wasn't with this particular bike, and because I needed to prove it to myself as well, and I did on our first ride, feeling very confident that as long as they keep within all legal speeds, I'd be fine to keep up. There was one hill that we climbed, which I couldn't muster any more than 65 going up it, and so I think that severe hills on the freeway, that's pretty much your guideline. But cruising at 70, 75 wasn't a problem as long as there was no severe incline. And if there's anybody who knows about Northern California, there's a severe incline as you take Highway 50 up to Tahoe. And I suspect that going up that incline, I would not be able to hold 70. I have a feeling that I'd be able to muster 65, but that's it. And those are the kind of limitations that a 500 definitely brings to you. But it is such a designed as a street bike that tall gears at the top enable you to comfortably cruise at 70 and not feel like you're screaming the engine like you would be on a sport bike. It's a very comfortable cadence on the freeway, even though the vibrations feel like you're screaming or flogging the engine unnecessarily. But the engine itself reassures you with a very relaxed cadence, exhaust note, and so you don't feel like you're necessarily flogging the engine. I remember when I did some duty as a motorcycle escort for funeral parlors, and we dressed up in essentially police-like uniforms with the tall leather boots on the outside of our pants and rode auctioned off old Kawasaki 1000 motorcycle police specials. And I remember riding those bikes constantly reaching for a fifth gear when there was no other gear. If it was a 5-speed, then I was always looking for a 6-speed that wasn't there, or I think it was a 4-speed, and I was always looking for a fifth gear that wasn't there, because when you were on the freeway, that motor, it was an inline air-cooled 4-cylinder engine. It screamed at you. It screamed at you, and um, was very unhappy. It felt really old school with the vibrations, and also with the fact that the motor itself was just screaming. It was a high revving motor, but it's not a very calming exhaust note to be there in the saddle all day as your office, like a police or a highway patrol often did. Um, and that was always surprising to me with that motorcycle, knowing how many cops must have spent so many hours riding them. The saddle was very comfortable. The seating position was very comfortable. It had that full fairing windjammer type fairing up front, and it was the quintessential police motorcycle for many years until the BMW came along. So that Kawasaki 1000, you know, that was the nature of the motor. It just made you feel like you needed another gear when you were on the freeway because it was screaming at you. But this bike doesn't do that, and it's surprising that way. So the fifth gear in this bike is very tall and very relaxed, and that makes it nice. It just takes away the power for big hills. Um, the other issue in owning this is one of the videos taught me, since it is so old school, to, on the very first ride of the day, especially on cold days, to pump the Kickstarter 20 times to prime the engine with lubricant before you go ahead and start the motor. And with the Indian style, videos, they were thinking that, prime the engine 20 times and then start the engine with the kickstand is the way that they were explaining it. But they don't know about lazy Californians who say, if I've got electric start, I'm going to use it. They were talking like they were trying to prolong the life of the battery. But I've been using electric start motorcycles my entire life, so I'm spoiled, and I have yet to actually start the bike with the Kickstarter. But I could make this the first and show you. Let's see. Try to like this. All right. Yeah, I recently had a pickleball injury to my knee, and I'm feeling like, no, that would hurt my knee. So we'll have to try that another day. But I do like the idea about priming the engine on the first ride of the day with oil, coating it with oil, as if that would really make a good difference in longevity, just in the fact that you're able to lube it up before you actually start it. So that's pretty good. And here I also talked about the side glass in my original video, and here I want to show an up close of it. So basically, it's showing perfect amount of oil in the side glass. And the last time I rode the bike, when I turned it off, it was all black, like I couldn't see a level on it. And that's how unpredictable it is. Sometimes it shows correct, and sometimes it shows completely full, like you want to panic and empty out some oil from it because it's not reading right. But the other issues that I wanted to talk to you about is uh, this motor itself is really the heart and soul of the bike, and um, it's like falling in love with one particular make and model of anything, I guess. This motor is a great motor, um, and is a workhorse of a motor, and is a reliable motor, and is a lovable motor for all its quirkiness. Um, and just like we love Harley exhaust note, in fact, Harley had their exhaust note, it was their firing order. They had patented it so that the Japanese bikes could never get the same exhaust note that the Harley had, because it was basically their firing order, which gave them that particular exhaust note. And so Japanese bikes, no matter what they no matter what they tried or whatever, they always ended up sounding like an outboard motor just submerged just beneath the water, muffled beyond belief. And I remember years ago there was a Harley, not a Harley, but a Honda that came out. It was one of the VTXs. I think it was a 1300 Honda, and it was a very aggressive chassis, a very stylish rake to the front end. It looked like one of those Orange County or Orange Coast chopper build-off bikes. I think that's what they were going for. But it ended up to be a real docile pussycat, especially with the exhaust note out of that 1300. It sounded like a 1995 Shadow. I mean, it was just really muffled. And I remember that when I bought my Kawasaki Drifter, I remember buying it right when it came out, and there was an actual motorcycle commercial, which are very rare, on regular TV that ran for about a week and then disappeared. But it was the Drifter commercial. Basically showed a young man going to see the farmer's daughter and having to get out of there real quick because the farmer found out, or he was on his way home. And so it shows this Drifter just tearing ass out of there as she's crying goodbye and the father's coming home. And I remember thinking, that is not the exhaust note of that bike, because I owned one at that time. And basically thinking that they stole a soundtrack of a Harley, or created something that sounded more like a Harley to run as a exhaust note for that bike as it tore out of there. Because my exhaust note from my stock muffler on the Drifter was very, very muffled, and it had a huge chamber underneath the motor that was like an exhaust, a connection to the exhaust. It was some sort of additional, it must, if you took it out of, disconnected it from the muffler, it probably would have weighed 12 pounds. But this big round pillow, iron steel pillow kind of shaped chamber underneath the motor, which was connected to the muffler, was some sort of either dampening or baffling kind of chamber, back pressure chamber. I never took it out or removed it, even though it would save a lot of weight, because I knew that that would change the back pressure and that would change all the settings, which I didn't want to, change things, because sometimes you have to remap your EFI if you change things. I didn't want to do that, so I left it there. But I'm sure the exhaust note would have changed if you had taken it out and just connected it straight, or I bet you, and also would have lost a lot of weight, but I also bet you would have changed the sound altogether of the exhaust note. But this bike is infamous for a beautiful exhaust note, and um, and the muffler's pretty straightforward, no hidden um, baffler underneath the engine. It is what it is, and it's just a straight quintessential English style, straight. I don't know what you would call this type of muffler, but I'm sure it does have a particular name, cigar shaped or something. Who knows? Anyways, it's all straightforward, and that's what this bike is. Everything is straightforward. Um, and for people who end up having to change the tires, there's a unique little thing that leaves the chain right where it is, and the tire comes out without removing the chain and all that, which is something unique and very practical if you have to change the tire out in the middle of the Himalayas. But apparently it's quite time saving to have the chain and everything in place as you just remove the tire and put it back. And as far as where I'm going to find brake pads for this particular brake setup is another question. I guess I'll just revert to the internet. It's a 2-piston caliper. But also you can change this whole setup. If these bolts right here are the same, they are generic distance for other brake setups, then it might be possible to actually replace this whole thing here with one that's local, like a Brembo, maybe even a 4-piston caliper, and replace it all together. Maybe it would be this bolt here and that bolt there. So that's also something to look into. I know it's certainly possible for bicycles to change the whole pistons as well as the. So other than that, the bike has been superb. It has a problem with the kickstand because there's a electronic sensor on it that won't let you start the bike when the kickstand is down, but then that sensor malfunctions and you have to end up kicking the kickstand down, kicking it up, kicking it down, maybe 3 or 4 times before the sensor senses it being in that position, and then you can go ahead and start the bike. So a lot of times I try not to even touch it, then I don't have that problem, even though using the kickstand comes in very handy sometimes. So that's one thing. The other thing is when I first got the bike, I had to remove the back tail light. Without actually physically touching the bulb, I checked the connections because it was sticking on brake light instead of regular light. And I fiddled with the connections, got them really good, and then I haven't had any problems with the brake light. See how this is. Okay, so you can see it's not sticking. it's doing a pretty good job. It's not sticking. So um, I really like my big Harley seat because it really added to the looks, and riding a spring seat like this is a completely different feeling, um, because it sways just slightly to the left and right. Being on springs, those springs do give a little bit to the left and right, which is an odd feeling. Not much, but just slightly. And so you feel like you're on hinges a little bit, and you bounce a little excessively sometimes, which is fun. But also it reminds you that this is not a race bike, it's not a speed demon, it's a go slow and enjoy the view bike, and still get respect enough from other motorcyclists that you're not on a scooter. They wouldn't even give you a high five for that, or a little hand high gesture if you were on a scooter. But being on another motorcycle, they'll give you the hey, what's up, and they'll recognize that this is a classic, and they'll be oohing and awing over it, even though if you think about dirt bikes, Elsinore 500, I think there was an Elsinore 500. That did not necessarily feel like a very big bike back in the day, an Elsinore 500 dirt bike. So you're normally, in other words, this CC range, you're usually associating it with dirt bikes and off-road bikes instead of street bikes. Smallest street bike I can think is the Honda Rebel, and I think that's a 250, so that's pretty small. And so basically that's pretty much all I have for now, and keep tuned, and I'll let you know how things go.